Hello and welcome to Dicebreakers, a D&D podcast and stream with mostly accurate rules and inconsistent character voices. I'm Alex, your host and DM, and with me are Mark and Joe, my wonderful players for today. How is everyone doing today? Hopefully, we will be joined by Simon very soon. Today is a different episode. I know I didn't give you a chance to say how you're doing, but I'm just kidding.
I thank you.
Adequate.
Adequate. Fair enough. Today's a different episode because it's a C2 discussions. Which means we'll just be talking about what's been coming up, because what's been going on, because next week coming up is the last episode of what we are kind of officially calling a season, even though there isn't really seasons in a campaign like this. It's just like a chapter, a season, a place to pause whilst we do some other things. Which means for the podcast, if anybody listening, there will be, this will probably be posted on a Tuesday, and then there will not be one on the Thursday, because there's only going to be a couple hours of this, and I figure it'd be easier doing one episode than split it up randomly. So there'll be an episode missing. Oh my god, what? But yes, I'm going to start. My first question is to you two. How are you feeling about the campaign?
Not campaign. Oh, that campaign.
It's alright, isn't it?
Yeah. And thank you for listening to this episode.
I'm waiting for it to get going.
Yeah, it's still starting. It's still just about getting going.
Well, I think personally, I think it's great. I mean, I love the way it's worked out. This sort of boundless world. I mean, the boundless world idea is a good idea in the first place, but the way you've managed to sort of fit it in just ahead of where we are. But then it's got a huge framework already in place, which we're working within. And yeah, so far I've really enjoyed it. And the all the little sub stories for the individuals and things, and something I do like. I'll let Joe get a word in edgeways in a second. Something I do like.
I don't believe it.
Well, it's hiding. Like, I didn't say exactly when. Something I do like is the fact that we are, like, Greg has now changed his character, so we're sort of not hidebound by a set of characters going from goal to goal to goal, and that's always what it's going to be. It's sort of fluid and changing, and the characters obviously tend to develop anyway, but we're actually developing a bit more than that. And the fact that some of the non-player characters are almost like characters in their own right. We've had characters who've joined, then moved on and left or whatever, but they're proper, fully rounded characters. So I think it's been really good. What do you think, Joe?
I would agree. I really enjoy how like Gel is set up in itself with its own kind of rules as the universe. So I'd say lots of people who play D&D will be familiar with like the Forgotten Realms as kind of the air quote default setting for D&D, where it's in a lot of the source books, references, things that happen in that, etc., etc. It's really easy to forget that you don't have to play D&D in that setting. So I really enjoy that there are things set up in the world. So things like, the planes being a really consistent idea through D&D, your take on it, where it's pretty much all one plane, but, there might be different planets elsewhere, and therefore it's not, shifting through dimensions to get to it. In theory, you could build a rocket and fly there. I really like. And then you get the kind of the limitation with like long distance teleporting and that kind of thing. And I think that creates what has been a really interesting story, because of the there's a word for it. Totally blanking on. Subverting the expectation. That's it.
Yes. No, I mean,
I'm through English GCSE.
I know. Blimey.
Well,
we'll talk about the pathetic fallacy next, mate. Don't you worry about that.
No, I mean on that point.
Juxtaposition. Lots of juxtaposition.
On that point, like when I started, so the D&D journey was we actually started with 4e, 4th edition, modified 4th edition in our first D&D. This isn't on DBDnD. We started modified 4th edition, playing a campaign that my father, Mr. Mark up there, was DMing, which was like our introduction, and in a way it was kind of a mistake we did 4e, because I think 4e,
check the door.
4e is generally, I'm going to use a very technical word here because Joe's gone for technical English, so I'm going to say 4e is very bad. So we when we were like finishing off that, I looked at 5e and started. I mean, when I started looking at 5e, it was like, oh, this is interesting. and then I started kind of making a campaign. But the first campaign was very, it was kind of railroady, but within its own realm. I made a campaign from start to finish. It had a start, it had an end, and some players that would follow through it and do it all. But when I started C2, I kind of challenged myself and pushed myself to say, well, instead of having a thing that's happening, a campaign, although obviously there was a campaign in there, let's just start with, what does the world look like? Let's start outwards. So, this is where there's two suns and like all the rainbow belt. There's a reason for the rainbow belt and all that kind of stuff, and it all has its own lore building in towards each country. But the reason I think, because you were saying like everything has like something in place and all that. Well, it's because it's a blend. It's my personal blend of improvisation and predetermined sort of skeletal structure. So, like, if when you said, oh, we're going to go to 4th, even though I sort of pointed you that way, it was like, okay, now I write 4th. It has its framework. If you ask about it, I know things about it, but now I go in depth about 4th, and you go there, and then there's a lot of lore, and they're like, okay, now we're going to go to Dina Faro, and let's go over there and write this. It makes it a lot easier, but everything has its own... Like, the most important thing to me is, like, what Joe was saying, was, like, the laws of the world. Which sometimes get invented, like they don't exist and they get invented. I try to make sure that if I add something, it tracks. Are
you saying this was the Zack Snyder director's cut?
Yes. Yeah.
It's the internal consistency that makes it come alive when it's going to be there every single week.
Yes, exactly.
Because it also then the kind of the burden is then on us to make sure that we remember that as well. Like there was.
It is.
Well, it's like there was a spell. I was talking about this to Alex a couple of weeks ago. There's a spell that I was thinking, oh yeah, this will be great, and this will work out for like things that I've got planned for the future, that I now have access to. And then I was like, can't do any of that. Can't do any of that because we can't teleport places. So I've got to fix that first, and then I can do that. And like those kind of things, I think. Because it could well be that if I had not remembered, I would have gone, I would have done it, and then we would have just been boned in whatever the situation
Black dragons
was.
in the sky.
And probably made a bad situation worse. So
I don't know if the teleportation was intentionally a climate change analogy, but it was.
Yes, exactly.
It was not intentional. No.
No, the whole planar shifting thing, I'll be honest with you, what didn't exist at the beginning of the campaign, because when we started a year ago at this point, it was 4 stories that were to do with the characters you gave me that were sort of triggered by this character, the mediator, and sort of gave you some information as to where you can go, what you can do, and I don't remember at what point the first sort of like the first like sort of time when it became sort of pushed into the story was when what's his name? I keep forgetting the guy in the hot air balloon. Jamil came over from, and then I started like playing around with this idea of there's something in between, and obviously it's fleshed out and become more of an idea. And like I'll be honest with you, some things come from you guys suggesting things, and I'm like, that's a good idea. Some things come from me, and some things are just like on the spot. I go, now I'm just going to say this because it fits right now, and then worry about making that fit in later. I'll make it work, but I'll just say it now because I don't know. I kind of like the challenge of improv.
Doctor Who.
Yeah, well, current Doctor Who. I like the idea of the improv because it means that no matter what happens, like having the improv in there means you can always pick an option. There's never a defined number of options. If you say we're going to do this, I can go, right, wasn't expecting it, but let's go. Let's create that as an option. Let's make that a thing. And I think maybe there could be the story itself might be, more like a blockbuster film if I wrote it all first. But I don't know. I try to aim for the more fun bit, which is you guys.
I think it's a really testament to you that you were able to kind of keep pretty much the entire world building in. Well, I mean, obviously with like notes and stuff, but you
so many notes
had like the whole potential world in your head rather than like us being railroaded into a certain area and therefore only having to prepare a certain area. Like you kind of did need to develop a kind of geography and history kind of degree for Shell.
I mean, there's tricks and tactics. There's a couple of tricks and tactics in there. One, I don't care about actual geography. I don't know what the physics of it that means that the south pole is cold and the North Pole is hot. I don't know what the physics of that is. I don't know how that works with two suns. I don't know how it spins around those suns or rotates or anything. But also, I don't give a
presumably
shit.
Presumably there are like towns that you built that, whether they were in fourth or whether they were in whatever it is, because around like we would have encountered that town.
Well, yeah. So with the weather, I said it really doesn't matter. Also, there's no seasons because I don't track. I track time a little bit sometimes, but I'm not tracking seasons. Come on, because I'm not doing that. Like that's a level which I'm just not getting to. Maybe I could do, but I made the decision not to. But the other thing that you're kind of mentioning is, if I want an event to happen, it'll be wherever you go. You know, like if something's going to happen, it doesn't really matter where you go. It'll kind of happen as a part of what you're doing, like story beats. Like for example, it's no hidden sort of thing that last episode where you did was it last episode or the one before where you did the weapons trade and it kind of linked back to things. Yeah, obviously that's a thing that was like a story beat ish that sort of sets up some more background stuff. It's gonna happen no matter what. But I don't really care where you are when it happens because it doesn't matter. That doesn't. You could be anywhere for that to happen. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a couple things to make it easier, but generally I kind of just, if something is said in a certain place, it'll then stay there. But that's easier because I mean, I think I have something like 270 documents, which is gel right now. all G docs.
But then I mean, if you think about Terry Pratchett's books, that's how it developed that way. I mean, I don't think he really thought that way to start with, but he ended up with this sort of setup of a world and certain groups within the world and certain rules.
Well, I mean, he properly set up kind of geophysics for rimwood and hubwood and these kind of compass point directions that you don't have.
And the better, the more complete he made, then I think the better the stories got because everything fitted together. Sure. And also, of course, Tolkien's the same sort of thing. So you have this sort of huge background, a canvas on which you can paint, rather than having a random. Or like as you were saying, Alex, when I did the first little go at D&D just to see what it was like, I didn't bother doing any of that stuff because it was only ever going to be a one shot, and it was only going to be a simple thing. So I was just creating what were effectively maps. It was like almost like the old style dungeon crawling stuff, where I'd do a map of an area, and you'd work your way through to find the key in that room to open the door in that place, to get the key to that one to open the door, and you find the document kind of stuff. And then once that's finished, that sort of building is done with, and then next week will be at a different one. So we never really had this kind of, and that meant it was very much on rails, and you had to go to that place. There wasn't anywhere else in existence. You had no choice. Whereas your world is far more open, and therefore the role playing is far, far easier to do and more effective because you can suddenly decide. Tell you what, I fancy getting a tan. Let's go to which way is it? North. Let's go somewhere sunny. And you go.
I thought you were going to say tanning salon.
Tanning salon.
Honestly, if you said tanning salon, I'd probably just be like, sure, let's find a tanning salon.
We could do that. And we could just say, I've got the map here, which I will have in front of me. We could just sort of say tomorrow. We're not. We're down in Highbrush at the moment, down to the south. We could say tomorrow. You know what? We've never been to the north of DNA Faro. Let's go up there and see what's up there. And you'd go, fine, that's what you're doing, that's what you're doing. And we would go there and you would just create something in that area. Because we already know it's hot. We know where it is on the continent compared to everywhere else we've been on the continent. We already know the kind of people are going to be. You've got the whole background already in place. So you haven't got to start completely from scratch. And you can just do it like that, at the drop of a hat. And you could take one of your...
Keep going.
I can say you could take one of your existing scenarios, which you think is going to happen at some point, and just say, all right, it's going to happen out there then. It's fine.
I mean, you give me a lot of credit for it. I mean, I will humbly take about 50% of the credit. Like the fact is, I've said this before. If you guys didn't do what you do, it doesn't matter what the fuck I do. You make the world playable and usable. You do the RP. You make the decisions to go in directions that actually make sense. Rather, because you say
some of us do the RP.
you say, you could just turn around and go somewhere else. Yes, you could, but you don't like purposefully, as some people, you hear these horror stories of D&D, you don't purposefully go, I'm going to do the most difficult thing for our DM right now. I'm going to make it really awkward. Let's make him really struggle. Because, fine, some people find some sort of fun
you say
in that
hear horror stories. I mean, I always bring this back, but we have literally experienced that, so...
We have?
In our very, very, very first campaign, where one of our
like a long time
decided
ago.
to
Yeah,
shit himself.
well, those weren't really campaigns, but we'll get to that. But we'll get back to that. What I was saying is that you guys, you make it easier for me.
I think you were there.
We'll get back to that. You guys make it easier for me. You make it possible for me to make the world an actual sort of like realization. Because, like I say, you could turn around.
We know.
we are pretty brilliant in this space.
No, but for real, like people talk about the Matt Mercer effect, and obviously we are not a Critical Role, but people talk about the Matt Mercer effect, where everyone says, "Oh, it's the Matt Mercer effect," where every DM wants to be like Matt Mercer, or every player expects people to be like Matt Mercer. And whenever I look at that, I'm like, it's wrong. The terminology is wrong. It is not the Matt Mercer effect. It's the crit roll effect. Because if you look at the players of Matt Mercer,
I don't know who Matt Mercer is.
so Matt Mercer is the DM of the most known D&D campaign.
I've heard of Critical Role, but I've never.
And the reason everyone loves it so much is because it's a really, really good story to listen to and watch and stuff. But there's
because they're professional voice actors.
They're professional voice actors, but also
they're
professional voice actors. But people always say, Matt Mercer.
Yeah, they all do video games and anime and stuff.
I'm never going to finish a fucking sentence. People always say Matt Mercer is, the reason why it ruins it for other. No, look at the characters. Look at the players. Matt Mercer could do nothing with bad players. We are not. If Matt Mercer was DMing for us, it would not be good.
He'd be in trouble.
It would be so awful because we're not. They've been doing it for years and years and years and years and years. And
for one thing, we'd all be starstruck.
The fact that I'm rubbish at it should not detract from the fact that I have been doing it for a long time.
Well, you haven't been doing like strong role play for a while. You've been doing more old style D&D. But the point is that
there was a 30-year gap in the middle where I didn't actually play it.
Yeah, but the point is, I don't want to take any all of the credit because you guys really make the world actually kind of exist and do its own thing. The story that you're talking about was. You were there, Dad, because you were the one that was DMing. It was when we were really, really long time ago. We were doing like sort of touches of some D&D type stuff. We weren't really doing campaigns or anything. It was just like these like little one shots just for a bit of fun. And we had some friends around. It was in person. And one of the people, I can't remember what it was to distract.
Yeah,
he's not.
Yeah, it was some sort of distraction,
like a werewolf or something, to like pull him away from the back. It was like, to distract the werewolf, I'm going to shit myself. And we were like. What?
We know you can do like anything you want in a role-playing game, but that doesn't mean you have to.
But like maybe it would make I can see situations where that might be funny and make sense, but it was just so not the right place or time or making any kind of sense. I was just like,
you can kind of for some sort of like kind of really kind of crass verbose like kind of. Like, I don't know, like a bard character who's kind of jokey and
or like massively drunk or something, yeah,
or drunk or whatever. Like, you can make sense, but I'm pretty sure he was just like a warlock or something.
It's just,
and it was completely apropos of nothing. There wasn't like a character behind it. It was just a thing that he did.
It was an odd situation. Yes.
In all fairness, we were young at the time. I don't know if he would make that decision now, but who knows.
No,
I mean, there is an element where you were saying about Matt Mercer having good players and so on, and there is, like anything, the more you practice something, the better you get at it, and I think that includes playing the characters we play in D&D. Not only do you get into the individual characters, I mean, like I miss Whitebane because I really enjoyed playing the character, because I really got into it, and you get to the point where you sort of I know how this character would react in a given situation, mostly, not always, because then Alex would throw something at me like. But I missed that because I got used to the character. But at the same time, you get better at sort of playing the character you're trying to play. So initially, it's very difficult to be anything other than what I would do. What would I do in this situation? I would hide under the table because there's a big man trying to kill me with an axe.
I mean, also chemistry between not only chemistry within the team and between the team and the DM is also super important as well. I mean, again, that's the case with us, and it's the case with Critical Role.
We have very good chemistry. The thing that helps a lot with them is they are literally paid in both their voice acting jobs and when they do the D&D stuff to get into character and be a character for a while. Like, they being voice actors, they are professionally paid to get into character.
Although, as far as you can tell, they are also pretty good friends, and at least
they're very good friends.
At least two of them are all work couples.
So Matt and I think it's Marisha. They are married and have a child.
And forgotten his name, the one that was Grog.
Travis and Laura are married.
Yeah.
And Sam and Liam have been best friends since years and years ago. And Matt and Taliesin have played D&D together for years before Critical Role.
Yeah, well, they did Pathfinder before they did D&D.
Yeah, well, it's funny actually. So for people who enjoy Critical Role, but or even if you're just kind of hearing of it, kind of the story of how it came about is very much a story of friends getting together to play D&D. And that is all it was. It was people who kind of ran in the same circles. Most of them had met or were, more casual friends than they are now. And some of them had never played D&D before, like joining this game that Matt Mercer ran for them. As I believe it was for Liam's birthday. And that was how they kind of got started. And from there, it then turned into something that they, got streaming on Geek and Sundry, and then started their own company. They've now started their own charity. It's all kind of snowballed from that.
Yeah.
But at its core, it started as, and I think, if you were to strip away all the production value and all that, it is still very much a group of friends playing a game.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And I think as we were saying, it's really important that the players get on well together.
Oh, yeah.
Because the interaction of the characters is obviously fed by the interaction with people. And something else, going back to what I was saying about, going back to what I was saying about getting better at it, you've also got to become less self-conscious.
Oh yeah.
Because if you're going to play somebody doing something you would never do, it's difficult sometimes to sort of say, well, okay, in this case, I don't very often play evil characters. But an evil character would like to go there and slit this child's throat or something. You think, well, I can't even say that. I can't even pretend that because I just would not do that. But you've got to be able to sort of get out of that mindset and into the I am playing a role like I'm playing an actor on the stage.
Well, see, that's my worry about the upcoming Dungeons and Dragons movie that has been announced. And
the movie
and stuff like that. Because what I would love to see is that exact thing that you just described, Mark. I would love to see it where you have a group of actors who are the friends at the table playing, and then fade, and suddenly we're in the Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings-esque look of whatever the fantasy world is. What I don't want to see is kind of just the story of something like that, because then you miss all of the things with people having to get out of their heads and grow as players, that kind of thing.
So when they said this could be a D&D movie, like when I first heard it, I was like,
it seems kind of counter to the entire point of D&D.
Well, it's not just that. It's like, how do you make a D&D? It sounds like saying, oh, we're going to make the horror movie. It's like, okay, but like what? It's just a high fantasy. If you say D&D, it's just high fantasy. You then have to like do something with it. And I like the idea of.
Yeah, I mean the point of D&D is that it. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I like the point of like the big gigantic, like they get Dwayne the Rock Johnson or whatever, the big to be the barbarian, to then like get into a fight and be about to like chop some dude's head off and then just pause and be like, yo, I don't really want to do this. Like that's sort of like breaking the fourth wall-ish, take away from the actual action to keep it those notes of it's still a group of people playing D&D, kind of like a perfect example is the new Jumanji, the newer Jumanji films.
I was just thinking of that would be a great model to base it on.
Yeah, because
you have that kind of thing.
Yeah, because they have the kids playing, or the grown actors playing kids playing the big actors, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because they do the things like, I don't want to do this. This doesn't make any sense for for them, but they still do it, and
I was going to say because D&D the movie, unless you bring that kind of literal role playing element into it, that's just a fantasy setting.
It's Lord of the Rings.
It's just any like the whole point of D&D is that you are like that the audience is effective kind of interacting. Although I guess Critical Role kind of turns that on its head, but you're seeing other people do the interacting and stuff.
Yeah.
But and there's such a sorry, carry on, Simon.
It's such a live based experience that making a live action like pre-recorded directed movie about it kind of removes the entire point of D&D as a kind of
all they have to do is make
kind of fantasy improv session.
All they have to do is make the story and not give an actor the script.
Yeah, exactly. They should do, as Simon says that. I mean, the whole point of it is it's improv RP. And
if they were going to do that, they'd have to get like professional improv comedians.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you need
Just
the
get
thing is
crit
you've got to
roll.
make it look like it. It doesn't have to actually be improv, because films are not. Films have to appear to be something. They don't have to be the thing, but it has to at least appear to be improv.
What are you talking about? I thought Hogwarts was real. We don't mention that place anymore.
There's a meme that goes going around about it, saying that what this person wants from the movie is for, in one scene, one of the characters to die, and in the next scene the same actor rocks up as a different
Oh
character.
yeah, 100%.
That would
Yes.
be
Because
great.
clearly that is what happens
That's
in
how it
D&D.
works. Absolutely.
But it's
That would be amazing.
such an opportunity for comedy from a whole bunch of different places. You could make it very Monty Python-esque.
Oh yeah.
Where you're walking through the woods and the characters are you've got big, strong, brave paladin and the wizard reading a book, or and someone could turn around, look up the sky and go, "Can I want to do this thing. Can I do this thing?" And the voice, a heavenly voice comes down, being like, "Yeah, sure. Why not? That sounds like fun. Go for it." And then they try and do it. We don't have to
finish a fight, and then the big barbarian guy goes, "We forgot about the XP again."
Yeah, stuff like that.
I'm thinking of another, and it would be a fun challenge of like something like a kobold type looking thing that doesn't look quite right appears, and then one of the characters goes, "Yo, kobolds don't have, don't have wings. They don't have wings." And it's just like the wings disappear. Like, oh, my bad, my bad.
Yeah, we don't need to see, and I think this is something that the Critical Role animated series have said that they're not going to do this, which I think is the right way to go. Is we don't need to see the dice roll.
No.
Because the dice rolling is not the important part of D&D. It's the mechanic, but it's not the important bit. Like, if, there is music playing and it's thematic and, someone has just swung a sword and beheaded the ogre or something and it looks awesome, you infer that that's a nat 20 or, whatever. Someone trips over their feet and face plants into, a cow shit. We infer that is a nat 1.
I was going to say that in Terry Pratchett, in one of the earlier ones, because he sort of slightly references.
Oh, it's so D&D.
It is
inspired.
in the very early one, and there's a couple of ones in there where Rincewind, who's anyone who has
pathetic wizard.
He's the pathetic wizard who's the sort of main character in the first couple of books, and turns up again later. But he hears this sort of rattling sound, the rattling of bones, which is obviously the dice. He doesn't, and you don't get to see what the dice are. You don't get to see what the roll is, but he hears a rattling, and then something happens. So you could actually have that in the. It would be
That's a quote which Alex has heard me say before. I don't know if Mark has as well. I think it's from one of the. I want to say it might be from one of the Witcher's books, and the quote is "Thunder rolled. It rolled a 6." Which the entire kind of does the whole overarching theme of the gods playing dice with the lives and men and all of that. And the first two books, like you were saying, are heavily D&D inspired as well.
But I was going to say that it would be a mistake to see the dice. I think you're right, because you don't want to see that. Oh, they rolled a natural 20. Something good is going to happen. You hearing that there was a dice roll. And then something happens, and then they see what happens. They go, "Oh dear, that wasn't a very good roll."
What a great challenge to implement something like the sound of rolling dice into a musical score, into an original soundtrack for those kind of moments. And when I say the rolling of the dice, nothing wrong is if they're kind of gonna cut between at the table and in the world.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with showing the people at the table, being excited,
Stranger Things did it. And I think they did it pretty well, to be honest. I thought.
Yeah, well, Stranger Things is great for this idea of D&D, but
I've never seen it. I want to see it.
They kind of just vaguely inferred D&D, and then they named they named a Demogorgon. They named something a Demogorgon that looks nothing like a Demogorgon, and kind of vaguely made it a thing, and then it was they kind of just used the words, and then I don't know. Anyway, we could talk about the D&D movie for a long time. This is meant to be a C2 Talks. Second question.
That's my bad. Sorry, guys.
Oh no, this is all of us and exactly why I love these things.
I am the king of tangents.
I was going to say, second question. The first one was how you're enjoying it, and it's taken us half an hour. The second question I was going to ask is, and this is a more in-depth question. There's no necessary you don't necessarily have an answer. But what I was going to say is, considering everything that has happened and all that, and obviously I'm not going to confirm or deny anything, what are your guys' ideas of where the story... I always love hearing this. Where the story's going, or anything that's like been vaguely hinted at, or like you don't know the actual truth of, that you have theories for that are sort of pecking at your mind, or things you just generally like thought, I don't know if that's going to happen. I won't say yes or no. I'll probably make some notes and then, get better ideas than I have. So just get going and I'll get my notebook. Write my story for me.
I've got two.
Yeah.
So the one is that some kind of large scale fuckery is happening on Stannis Island, or to do with these apple things, because a bunch of different things have been pointing to there for the moment, like the apple-sized object that was stolen from the boat or the ship was supposed to be heading there. I think the king mentioned something else about that. The kobolds showing up from, with the airship looking for it. Kobolds then showing up with the weapons trade. And also, and this might be just a minor thing, Zegith said that his father was from Stannis Island. Or that he was originally from. Which could be something super minor, but just struck me as that's another thing to add to the list of things that are happening to do with Stannis Island. That's my first one.
Just before you move on from that, something that occurred to me about the apple on the boat and all that sort of stuff. You're right. It was obviously lining up for some.
Can we just make a little definition here? It's not an apple. I have never said it's an apple.
No, it's an apple-sized object, and we have no other descriptor for it.
That's right. But we have come across something similar to that. And I can't remember. It was when we went over in Forth, I think, wasn't it? It was the two islands in Forth.
This is something Joe wasn't there for.
Exactly, which is why I'm mentioning it now. So we went early on, we went up. Forth is here, to the northeast. There's two little islands, one at the top and one at the bottom. We were going up there for some of the, I think it was the first of the ingredients for Unit for his potion. And there were two tribes of goblins. And they were talking about the sacred stone they had. And the one tribe was saying the other tribe had stolen it. And we went down there and they said, no, ours has gone, the other tribe have stolen it. So it's like both tribes blaming the other one for having stolen this apple-sized or stone or some kind of stone. And I did wonder, since they've both vanished, we then at that point backed out because there's some kind of thing going on between the goblins. We weren't interested, or we left it alone. But I do wonder if that's ever going to tie back in again, those two missing stones. I don't know if it will, then it's anything to do with it. It just occurred to me when we were saying there's this fist-sized stone thing.
I mean,
it would match in,
I mean, it's equally, there's equal parts Chekhov's gun, and also there are multiple things in gel that can be apple-sized at the same time.
There's a lot of things that could, So just for the sake of you guys, remember, I think you were told it at the time, but there on the stones there is the lore or the legend that the goblins, I think they did tell you, which I can read out again because this is a legend according to the goblins, and it doesn't actually confirm or deny whether this is true or false, true or fail, yeah. or whether it's actually helpful. But I thought it'd be prominent for me to read out the legend
of Apple Cora.
Apple Cora, yes.
I love Apple Cora. Oh yeah. Sorry, carry
on. At least you guys haven't made jokes about Forth yet.
No, I've been avoiding that.
So what I have written, these are direct DM notes, and I will let you interpret your own thing. There is a legend in goblin lore that thousands of years ago, Maglubiet came down from the sky and spoke to Kerat, the most notable goblin cleric in goblin history. Kerat begged Maglubiet for some, I love the name Maglubiet, for some sort of fortune to help out his people, as they are weak and small and not very good against any of the races. Maglubiet pondered on this and decided to make 5 stones which they called the Truquet Stones, or in common, the Luck Stones. These stones are green-grey in colour, about the size of an apple but flatter, and have a white X carved and painted onto the face. These were imbued with stolen magic from Timora, otherwise known as Lady Luck, to help the goblins survive. And then the bits after that become blah 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 blah. I'm not going to tell you any of that. And then it goes to both islands claim that the other one has stolen their Truquet.
An extract from Romeo and Maglubiet.
So yeah, that's the thing you're referring to is those stones that the goblin lore says is these magic stones.
So I do wonder if that's going to. Anyway, sorry, Joe, I interrupted you, but that was just I thought I'd throw that in while we were talking about those stones because it did occur to me.
Absolutely, because I think Greg has hinted when he was trying to figure it out, because that was, I think, something that he had remembered parts of, but because he wasn't playing Edge, couldn't say anything about. Was getting really agitated that he couldn't be like, oh, this might be this thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure it came up a couple of episodes ago. I can't remember why.
I also love that.
I
Sorry, keep going.
okay, I was just gonna say, because I like that, like, things that bring luck are kind of a good staple, and bring together lots of things that bring really good luck. Sounds to me like something people would want to use for nefarious purposes. So that I think is a good basis for it. My second thing is actually about Greg's new character Ray, and what I think her motivations are. So I can not go into that now if you would like, or I can tell you what my theory is.
Well, hold on. The only thing I was going to say, that all I was going to say, is that I find it hilarious that up to this point, no one of any of the characters that you've played or are currently playing has actually seen any of these supposed stones.
That's right.
I'm not. That's not meant to be some sort of existential. No, I just find it amusing.
We've heard of them. We've now heard of them, and I was thinking, because when we came across didn't come across the one on the flying boat. Sometime shortly after that, I thought about that, but I thought, well, would Flint actually think about that? He probably wouldn't, because he doesn't. He sort of tends to work in the now, so he wouldn't really think about it. If it came up, he'd go, oh.
The reason I bring it up is because, obviously Greg, if he was Etch, would like try to link them, but you haven't seen any of them, so there is nothing for you guys to you could think like, oh, they might be related, but you have no idea. They could be completely different things. They could be exactly the same thing. I'm talking from a character perspective, obviously, but like, you have no idea what they are they related at all? Who freaking knows? Well, I know, but I'm not going to tell you.
But going back to Ray, yes, there's obviously stuff we haven't yet
go for your theory.
Out there.
Go for your theory.
So my theory / thinking is that Ray has been sent rather than run away from her kind of home realm, and is scouting out the possibilities of some kind of not invasion, but some kind of like takeover, because one of the first things that we had was and I think this is actually in my notes, I'm just going to bring it up.
He's cracking out the notes.
Bringing out the big guns.
Was because I won't go into how much of this is what Barty thinks and how much of it is just what I think, because save that for the game. Yeah, here we go. So I asked a question with Commune, saying, are her intentions towards us benevolent? And the answer I got was, good intentions are in her mind, but not towards you or your kind. So, and obviously,
was that answered on stream, or was that like a secret one?
No, that was on stream.
I don't remember
now that was, I think it was the episode where we fought the big black dragon, which you weren't there for.
Oh, that would be why.
So what that it doesn't take into account with like the spell and things like that is things that change in the future, but it's very much present tense at that moment in time. That was the kind of the answer. So good intentions, that tells me not a bad person, not an evil person, or kind of alignment, if you like, for D&D. But it's the question of then, who is you and your kind? So you probably being Bartlett himself. Your kind, this is before we had realised that she was from a different planet, that is kind of similar to what classic D&D would be like, the Feywild. So my assumption is that this mentor tutor person is some kind of archfey-like creature, and that the fight against the creeping darkness, horrible, doomy thing that they protect their kind of world from is not going super well, and so they've been sent to our planet to figure out if they would be able to come here, and if they did, would they meet a lot of resistance? Would they be able to take over fairly easily? Because one of the first things that happened with Ray was we went to go and see King Bragan, and Ray was very commented a few times on the king not being very powerful and how surprising that was to them. And then it was something that they looked up, I think, in a couple of other places about how the power structure of that country worked. That I might be misremembering. It definitely came up somewhere else that wasn't Corsia, at least once. But yeah, that's my thinking.
Just a shallow theory, not much to it.
I hadn't put quite that much kind of effort into it, as it were, but I have the feeling. Obviously, she's hiding something. Obviously, there's the reference to the this teacher from whom she gets all the power. There's more to that than just somebody who's a teacher. And I was thinking the same thing, that she's obviously scouting. She's looking for stuff because she's
communicating back to her family as well.
Yeah,
or they are communicating with her.
She's always very evasive about the notebook and so on, and what's in it, and so she's finding stuff out and sending back that she doesn't want us to know she's doing, which implies that it's something we'd probably stop if we could, or she thinks we would. But on the other hand, I wasn't sure whether I was thinking the same thing, and maybe this person wants to try and get through. Whether they want to get through because they, as you said, just want to come and live here, and they want to make sure they're not going to get slaughtered. Yeah, because she's also quite interested in how people feel about how she looks, even if the legs and things. Is she just making sure that if they come through, they're not going to get taken out? Are we the bad guys? It's a possibility because she might be just thinking, I can't let you see because I don't want to put my realm at risk from you lot. Maybe. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Can I just say
as well? I was just going to say very quickly on that note, what Mark said. Greg could have Ray go around, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, and this is just a detail that I've not picked up. Ray could be going around using Mask of Many Faces to walk around like a human and elf or whatever, but doesn't.
Yeah.
Very specifically, goes around as a satyr. Yeah, unless we say otherwise, that might not be a very good idea here. In which case, they turn themselves into like a butt person.
She did turn herself into a butt person. That is true. What I was going to say is, I always, I love how you guys play your character, and I have all sorts of compliments for how Joe plays Bartlett. But I didn't realize quite how well you play Bartlett as the not quite cottoning on what's going on all the time kind of thing. And this, I'm not, of course, confirming or denying anything you said, but like the amount of detail you've gone into that Joe is thinking about compared to what Bartlett has said is just, it's amazing. Sorry, you play Bartlett very well, apparently. Better than I even thought. There you go. Also, from chat, Rosie says, I do feel fear now. Thanks, Joe. I think you've just opened up an idea in Rosie's head, and this has...
Well, because it would be, I mean, some of that is suspicion on my part from meta-knowledge of knowing that Greg writes, Tolkien-length books.
Pretty much, he does.
And wanting to flesh it out, which, awesome. I'm sure he has loads of fun doing that. But it makes me wonder, because in that, if you're writing backstory of that length, me personally, I would struggle to do that without writing plot in there that you're then driving forward, and that is your motivation as a character.
Well, I will say on that, because this isn't meta for this situation, even when he did the character for C1 and for Etch and all that, the amount he writes for backstory is very large, but it's not just because it's plot. There's just a lot of like small details like that never come up. There's things about Barmoot, which was his C1 character, where
his friends who only turned up at the very
he had friends the whole time, which only turned up at the end. His family has like a proper rich history of like his parents, what they did, how I think there was like how they met, what sort of people they were. That never came up. Like he has a lot of small details, and even with Etch, small details that came up more because we started creating, Veluna as its own big idea. But there's a lot of stuff in there that isn't necessarily for anything apart from the way Greg uses it is kind of how I have a skeletal structure for the world. It's like if something happens to go in that direction, there's no it's just like, oh, that already exists, so I can sit back on that pre-written stuff So obviously I'm not confirming or denying whether or not he has like mastered the plot, but with all of his characters, there's a load of stuff in the background just because he likes to really flesh out a character. He just loves doing it.
Well,
I
mean,
learned
I was going to say with Flint, I did a lot of background stuff for Flint, but I created him because it also helps you to think about in a given situation what's he going to be like. You know, his background and you know my idea of what his life was like up to the point where this was. It isn't just he was a monk. There's what happened to him in that period helps, so you can get a feel for. Although to be fair, with Flint, as he's gone along, I developed him to be far more chaotic than he was ever going to be. He was initially going to be far more. I had in mind when I started creating him. You know the old Kung Fu series, David Carradine.
You always series. You always do this.
Like, I know.
You know this thing from when I was a childhood. None of us were there. When I was a childhood.
If you ever look it up, so there's a series called Kung Fu. So Kung Fu suddenly became like the thing nobody ever heard of it. And then suddenly in the 70s, I think it was suddenly a big thing. And there was a series called Kung Fu, and the idea in Kung Fu was that the main character, played by David Carradine, who's half Chinese, half American, and he's brought up in a Shaolin monastery, becomes extremely good at Kung Fu. You probably recognise this. There's he's one of the older masters there is sort of his father effectively, but then a prince or some sort of guy comes along, and one of the guards looking after the prince kills the main this character's mentor. So our hero kills the prince and then runs for it and goes to America. That's where the idea of what Flint's backstory came from. And then he goes across America, and he's a very peaceful, calm guy, but he's also extremely good at Kung Fu. So he wears his shabby clothes and shabby hat, and he tries to keep out of trouble and be calm and peaceful. And then somebody will try to attack him, and he just throws him 30 feet through the air. So that was what he was going to be like. He's going to be a really calm, peaceful, pacifistic kind of person. But he just gradually developed.
Didn't stick with that for too long.
No, or he did. But if you think right back, he was like that to start with. But then gradually, as time went by, it was just much more fun to me. I sort of introduced the idea that he was a bit
hot-headed.
What's the word? Well, he was
Head of fire.
Yes, head of fire. Well, I wanted to introduce the fact because he was basically a fire elemental type. I thought he can't be that calm. He's got to have a certain edge. So I had this idea, this internal struggle between how he ought to act as a monk and how he wants to act as this sort of impulsive fire elemental type. And what's happened, my reasoning is as time has gone by, he's had the opportunity to be much more impulsive, because in the monastery he didn't get that chance, and that impulsive side has come through now, and he's struggling against it, but not very successfully. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of an aside. But you carry on, sorry, Shane.
I have no idea where we were.
You forgot what you were saying now, haven't you?
Yes.
We were talking about Ray.
We're talking about Ray and your theories on that.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say that I've learned a lot from everyone, but specifically from Greg in terms of his approach to character building and role play, because last campaign, Minim was an exploration of character development during the story, and I neglected her backstory, which meant that I didn't have as much depth in terms of interactions with NPCs. And then this time round, I developed loads of backstory, but none of it was especially partly because of the way that Formicids kind of I conceived them. It didn't really. There was never any potential for it to interact with the main story, unfortunately. But it would feel like it was. But like, I did too much front loading last time and too much backstory this time. So whereas Greg kind of manages to get a kind of sweet spot in that, which I always find really interesting.
I mean, but Greg goes into crazy.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's way too much backstory.
He spends hours and hours and hours. Like the amount of detail he puts into the amount of detail he put into Etch was probably similar to the amount of detail I put into the entire of Gel to start with. Nowadays, of course, I have way more information about Gel, but like the initial bone structure was like, you know, and we had so much. The reason Veluna was such a fleshed out city is because Greg really wanted his character to be integrated into that city. So like, yeah, let's go for it. We spent hours and hours and hours creating Veluna and his character and Etch's interaction with it all, and you know, he goes full hog all the way into that. And I'm not saying by any means that makes him better. It doesn't. You know, some people can happily and very easily just go, I'll make a character, minimal backstory, let's go for it. And still have a very fun time, a very happy time. But that's why it's very intimidating when you look at his approach and method, because it seems like, well, if he's doing that, surely I should do that. Not really.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an element to that. I think I haven't listened to the podcast as much recently, but there's a really good D&D podcast called Join the Party, and
I know that one.
The most recent campaign, they started the season or the sessional campaign or whatever by creating the city that it was set in and like the history of that city. They used a tabletop game called I think it's called The Long Year, maybe. But essentially it's like a world building game. I sent it to Alex. But it looked quite interesting. But basically it meant that while they did develop their own characters with their own backstories and stuff, they all inherently knew the city that it was set in. They knew all the backstory of it. They knew what the different areas were and the locations and the kind of history and stuff, which meant that the characters interacting in that campaign, it just works really well because everybody is Greg, basically. Everyone's Greg, but they've all been Greg together from the start, which means that rather than us kind of settling in a story that Greg has written already, everyone is already in that story, and it just all made sense.
New indie band, Greg from the start.
I also want to say, just as because unfortunately, you know, they're not here, but as we've been confident planning and role playing, I do just want to say I have no idea what Purdy's planning process is, but I do love how she role plays Elsie. I think it's great. I think I could.
Purdy plays D&D chaotic.
Well, here's the thing. With Purdy, like, she initially, especially through C1, had some, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying this, had some like real sort of hold-ups on role-playing, because it's a very difficult thing to get into, and I think for all of us a little bit, but it was very difficult to sort of just play someone else, and in a sense, in some ways, you know, you can sort of twist it to be sort of embarrassing yourself. Of course, we don't think that. And we had many talks about it where it was like, no one, like, everyone is doing it, and no one's, making fun of you in the slightest. I mean, I've played all sorts of freaking ridiculous here's and there's characters, and even now, every now and again, I'm like, maybe, you know, I don't know how to play this or whatever. But she did a lot of like Elsie being chaotic. It was before you were here as well, Joe, and it was very sort of just like sporadic, and sort of all over the place. But then recently, especially with the whole like aging 10 years thing, she's focused in, and she was saying that the thing that triggered it for her, hilariously, was she was listening back to the podcast, and she found herself thinking, what the fuck is Elsie doing? Stop being so chaotic. She was getting like legitimately pissed off with her own character, and was like, yeah, I'm gonna switch up. No, she does a very good job of consistency, which I think is very, I mean, you all do a very good job of consistency, but she's very good at like, I think, if I were to compliment one thing for her role playing, it's the long game. It's a lot of stuff that like sits underlying, and you can tell it's there, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the most prominent thing all the time. It's like around and aware, and it makes you feel like, oh, something's up.
I have to say, it does feel like Elsie has grown into a fully fleshed character in the last few episodes, even specifically.
Because with the aging thing, it would be super easy to do, you know, intentionally or unintentionally, to have that happen and go totally different personality, all the rest of it, you know, just with the same backstory and kind of shared history with the party. But it feels very much more like a mature version of Elsie. And I just think it's so well done. I think she's really hit the nail on the head with it. Because it's a very, I'm sure it's a very hard thing to do.
Well, I was
in chat for Elsie, and hi Purdy when you're listening back to this.
Well, I was going to say, I will add on to that, not only has she done a good job of mature, like her brain has matured, or like, you know, chemical imbalances, blah, 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 has sort of settled it. She also does a very good job of still having the mentality of when she was 19. She's gone from 19 to 29. I mean, the differences in a person's personality there is a lot. And yes, she's mature, but she still has like Elsie tinges. She still is a little bit like immature in like some ways, emotionally immature, or like relationship style. She just doesn't really know what's going on. These kinds of things. So I think it does merge very well. She done a very good job with it.
Yeah, like the interaction with Ray and the kind of the thing on the leadership.
Yeah.
Of, oh, I thought I was doing really well. I'm more mature now. I'm a really great leader. Why are they questioning it? Oh, actually, no, I'm being a bit childish here, and I'm going to go and apologize. Now that I've had my kind of my feelings about it. I think it's really well done.
Oh, definitely.
I think so too. And I just Simon, I mean, you don't want to put yourself down too much, because I think the unit as a character, it's a very difficult thing to play. Just a slightly humanoid kind of character, but something completely, totally non-human.
Yeah, I kind of got off more than I could chew with it, to be fair. But
yes and no.
You've done a good job with it.
I'm proud with what I did with him.
I think so. I mean, because you've managed to do that sort of, you'll have chaos going on, and then it'll be like, and unit goes, yes, fine, and it's like exactly how I imagine he'll react. You keep that sort of deadpan, but at the same time, you'll just suddenly get in there, and so I think
again, you are very consistent with it as well.
Yeah, the character, and it has developed. The character has developed.
I appreciate that
within the limits of what a former Sid would be like, and I think that's
I think the one problem, the main problem that I felt with playing him, or not even problem, but restriction, was that because he's so far removed from every other kind of the culture of other sentient creatures on Gel, there are quite a lot of limits in terms of what he can or would do in certain situations. And sure, I could change him to make him more kind of outgoing, or find some reason to make him more chaotic or whatever, but that felt disingenuous almost to kind of force a reason for interaction where there actually isn't really one.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you play him as somebody who's, you can imagine with a sort of, except he can't smile, with this sort of slightly half
he can rattle his dice
smile. Exactly. Oh yes, exactly. He's half confused sort of smile. Okay, fine. So this is what's happening now. Fine. Okay, I don't really understand why, but if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. A bit like, so that you can imagine being in a room full of puppies running around in circles, just being, okay, fine, fair enough. You wouldn't necessarily get involved, but you find it quite interesting, and I think that comes across quite well.
So now that we've spent another half an hour on a question, it's great. We'll get at least 4 questions in. I do have 2 more in my mind. One of them, actually, there was a quick one I was going to say, which I don't want to stick on too much, but which was, it's kind of related to what we said. Is there anything that sort of disappointed you? It didn't become something more than, it never developed. Things obviously always could in the future, but is there anything where you're like, that's really cool? Oh, it's kind of a shame that's.
I have a part of that which is I don't think I would have changed it because of where it came in the campaign and where I was with unit at that point. But I have to say, I think Hybris was a bit short for. I thought that there might have been more in it, or had it happened earlier in the campaign, perhaps. Even just having a few fights with infected Vormises or something.
Yeah, I can feel that. This is where
at that point I was kind of, the eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that I was growing slightly tired of playing the unemotional person who didn't interact with people. I'm happy to have finished his storyline.
What I was going to say with that is it was kind of like an internal battle of yes, I wanted to throw some things at you, and I think my brain was battling between, it's been months and months and months, and this idea of this infection just sort of, it was on pause whilst you were away kind of thing. I was like, it just doesn't make sense to me. There was always an idea that it's going to take over. And I think to me, I wouldn't be justifying my own lore in my brain if it just happened to still be in an infixable state sort of thing. I like this idea of you spent such a long time away that it has just completely gone over, it was uncontrollable, and there's still this sort of central area where it's protected, but it kind of just you've already missed that part where all the big battles were going on, and there's zombie hordes and all those things. You missed that. You came back and it was just a wreck,
So I wasn't there.
What I think will be interesting is how that then plays out for the future of it, because So Alex, I believe you said before, correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of future campaigns, etc., will still be taking place in Gel.
Mhm.
So what we don't know, and we're not really sticking around to find out because we haven't really made any kind of mention of it, is any potential side effects of this kind of curing. So yeah, it might cure them of this fungal thing, but is there going to be some kind of side effect where
Presumably
suddenly,
there's some sort of side effect from like the Queen having selected 6 formicids
yeah,
to kind of bring
so
forward the
like
whole rest of the species.
yeah, like formicids are now presumably some kind of endangered species. Is there then going to be something where they aggressively make a kind of comeback and become kind of like an expansionist empire like the dwarves are? Or is there, there might be a thing where, the last remaining formicids get hunted down and we either have to help or stop, that kind of thing. Because I'm interested to see how that plays out in the future, because I still feel like there's, while Unit's personal quest might be kind of got objective achieved, I still feel like there's a lot of opportunity with the formicids and the kind of the culture and setting that you put in place, the two of you. I'm looking forward to seeing if anything happens with that in the future.
I have ideas.
I got.
Yeah,
So go on.
I was just going to say, because the actual continent or I guess country of Hybris is inspired by a game called Sunless Skies or Sunless Sea. Sunless Skies is the one that's inspired by. That is it's this kind of weird southern mushroom island in the kind of general map. And it's got this kind of weird settlement on it. It's people based, not ant based at least. But they're just like this weird kind of colony almost of people who are living in this weird kind of mushroom country, and they're all just a little bit strange. And you turn up there and nobody's visited for ages, and it's like kind of like a weird kind of like almost like a kind of creepy old people's home sort of vibe. Like everyone's really old because they've been there for ages and nobody has really come to visit them that much, and they've all just kind of aged. And then there's like a quest line at some point in the game, and after that point the island is just deserted. And depending on when you do that quest line, if you do that quest line and then the island is deserted, the rest of the quests that you could potentially do on the island they're just gone. Like there's a kind of permanence to it. It's not like as far as I'm aware, it's not a strict, like it's not like a strict point in the plot where the story happens. It just depends how far you develop on that particular line. And yeah, I just think it's just a kind of interesting parallel there of the consequences of your actions essentially kind of pertaining beyond.
Yeah.
And like you can go back there and use it as like a refuel stop, or like buy things from, there's like one guy who stays. But yeah, that there are other things on like the Wikipedia page that I didn't manage to do because I did the quest too early.
I was going to say that
go for it.
with the country I know the name of really well because I come from there.
Lesduin.
Lesduin, that's right, Lesduin.
England.
So I'm looking on that England. I knew there's something like that.
What is this
in
England?
Lesduin, there were two little bits in that never really properly. Well, one didn't really develop, and the other one might. So the one that we sort of touched on that never really happened was we were talking about the fact there used to be lots of other monasteries before the dwarven takeover of what was once the Elven lands, and that the guy who is now the sort of keeper of the vaults, or whatever we call them, I've got the notes somewhere, it was now a not very important role because there's nothing in them anymore. But there are some vaults out there somewhere which have all the stuff, and he has the clues of how to find those vaults. And my idea was that might sort of give us sort of a find quest, which might lead to perhaps a bit of interaction.
Well, at least a lot of us thought that the abbot was like the mole reporting to the dwarves.
Oh yeah,
so that whole
which
exactly.
we never found out who the mole was, did we?
No, I would have liked if we it wasn't. It was just because the way the story moved, because Flint got killed, and we had to move on.
Yeah,
we had to get out there early before really that had a chance to develop, because that would have been interesting to see if there's some way of getting sort of peace between the the new dwarven emperor and the Lesbian elves, because with we were setting it up that the dwarves are now deciding to try and take over, but there's this maybe possible storyline sitting in the background, and we never got the chance to really develop that one, and it becomes awkward because Flint. And it worked. I should say that I really enjoyed the way that the Flint storyline played out there, and him ending up running out and getting chopped down by the robots and all that sort of stuff. That worked really, really well. Not what I expected at all from the story, but it worked really well. But it did curtail the story, because the other part of that, of course, was also he was quite keen to try and get back to see his parents, which he did briefly. But then it was like the only way to do it now is to die. So it's like because you can't.
The only way he has done it is to die.
Exactly, and there's still this portal there to maybe investigate at some point. So that area is still, I think, something we could do with that. But it depends on. It's a bit tricky because the way the story is developed, and as I say, I like the fact it has. But Flint has become persona non grata, both to the dwarves, who if they find out he's around, want to kill him, and now with the elves, the all of the senior guys at the monastery. Also,
I think broken sick of that,
yeah. Because we broke out their prisoner and ran away, so he's now got. It's going to be very difficult to go back. But I mean, there are possibilities. I'm kicking around with that one, but it would have been interesting to sort of see that develop a bit more. But then it's not gone anywhere. It's still there. We can always come back to it at a later stage, maybe. I don't know.
Well, if you go back to, of course, there's now the weird part for Flint being that Flint, who is dead, is now the savior of Elezduin.
Yeah, exactly.
And also was some sort of prophet.
I was just about to say that, because in a similar vein to the thing about, Hybris and the future of the Formcids, you could absolutely, in a time skip campaign, you could absolutely play like a cleric of Flint, where they have developed like a whole religion around him. And even so Flint might like really die, open his eyes and be like, oh, am I some kind of god now? That's weird. And he's got clerics and paladins. And
it happens in a Brandon Sanderson book that the way that he structures them is like there's 3 books that happen at one point, and then it cuts to like 50 years later, and then he does the next 3 books. And in that time, the main character, or one of the main characters of the first series, who spoilers, I guess, he dies. And he essentially martyrs himself, and then you return to that city, and there is an entire religion based around that guy having martyred himself for the cause.
Well, I thought it was perfect, and I know to kind of toot my own horn, but I love this idea that you went away kind of as a savior, but then like things got a little warped and twisted because you were this sort of like baby from the other plane sort of type thing. You're always known to be you're little, like Flint was always the different one. Like he's not from here. He's sort of, where's he from? Whatever. And then this weird warping of like, he's going to be the one that comes back to save us. And then you came back and saved them, sacrificing your life for for them to be saved. And just like this, self-fulfilling prophecy kind of deal. And I do like this idea of, time scale. Like you Flint dies. And then there is a period where you are, dead or whatever, but then you just hear like a person talking to you, but you realize that they're praying to you.
Yes,
and you're like, yeah, sure. What's
would be a really
up?
Cool resurrection.
Exactly, but like
mechanism.
they've been praying to Flint, or like the idea of like the fire spirit that is Flint for 20 years, but you've only just really started hearing the voices. You've only just sort of woken up again. So they've been praying for a long time.
To me, and he said, "Hang on, I'll be up in 5 minutes."
Exactly, but then after 20 years, someone's talking to you, and then suddenly you're like, "Oh, what's that?" And they're like, "What?" I love this idea.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's really cool, actually.
You could have all sorts of things. So like, cleric and paladin, warlocks, whatever. You could also have like an order of, the monks could turn into an order of rangers. There is a class in Ranger called Horizon Walker, where one of their things that they get first at 3rd level is the ability to magically sense the presence of a planar portal. So that could be a whole thing of then this order of rangers springs up around finding these planar portals, waiting for the return of their fiery prophet, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
I just think that's so funny that this thing has sprung up around Flint without him having to really do anything in his absence,
which is
comes
perfect
back,
in Flint's
yeah,
mind, really.
does the
I think-
thing
Yeah,
that they're
Jonathan.
like, oh my god, he was going to save us and now he has, but he's still just kind of wandering about elsewhere, like not paying any mind. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that is exactly what it would be like, because Flint is sort of like I always think he goes through life with this sort of a real desire to help people and to be good as far as he can, but at the same time doesn't really think things through properly. So it's like he'll just see something, I ought to do this now, so he'll do
At
that,
least.
and then and it's like oh, mind you, that was partly because he wasn't meant to be like that, as I say. It's just the characters just developed that way from my original idea was that he would be a little bit impulsive, and he'd be trying to battle this impulsiveness, and that sort of battling bit of it seems to come by the board somewhat. So it's just, but that's because of the way the parties work. It's become quite a chaotic party in the sense that we tend to just follow our noses and do whatever's in front of us, kind of thing. We don't
I don't
really.
know what you're talking about.
so he just fits in with this quite nicely. So he certainly isn't the kind of person to sit down and plan. So
Don't mention the plan.
yes,
Oh,
exactly.
God.
There's so many things where I wish we were so much bigger of a podcast, because I want T-shirts that have things like "Don't mention the plan,"
Yeah.
It's a cat, not a tiger.
Strange links we get better.
Oh.
Yeah, things like that. There's certain things where I'm just like, and they're all related to Elsie. Where I just
They really
wanted to,
are.
I would want a T-shirt that says "It wasn't my fault."
yes.
Things happen. It wasn't my fault. That poor lady who got shot. You weren't there for that, were you, Joe? No, that wasn't my fault.
The poor apothecary.
Oh, that apothecary. That actually probably was my fault, but that wasn't me doing it.
Mostly
The lady
Elsie.
getting
Yeah.
the lady, that was because I couldn't decide whether Flint would actually step in or not. It's like
Yeah.
decision. But the lady who got a shot in the high street, that was unexpected. That
I
was
don't
partly.
remember that lady who got shot in the high street.
Oh, there was the situation where.
Oh, the bandit situation.
Yeah, and we were in a town. This is for Joe's benefit if you haven't heard this. So we're in a town, and you have to correct me if I misremember any of this.
I could tell the story because I know it.
Yeah.
I was going
properly.
from the point of view of Flint. I was going to say. So we're in a town. There's a couple of little kids who see us and think of us as adventurer warriors, and there's a little boy who wants to be an adventure warrior and he thinks we're great, And the next thing, there's some thugs coming down the main street, and the little kid and all the townspeople are at the other end, and the thugs have taken a hostage of a woman, and they're holding some kind of tube thing to her head. And then this little kid is walking down the street with his helmet 4 sizes too big, and did he have a weapon? I
There's
can't
a kitchen
remember.
knife.
Kitchen knife. So he's wanting to be a hero, and he's only like, you think about a kid who's like 6 years old.
Like 8 or something, yeah.
He's coming down the street, threatening these guys who are but heavily armed thugs, and then
And have qualms about how it's hurting children.
Yeah, and they have this tube thing, and it's not obviously a weapon against this woman's head, and they say anybody moves, the woman's going to die. Now, outside of the game, while they were saying that bit about that anybody moves, the woman's going to die, I wasn't actually paying attention. I was doing something else. Then I came back into the real world, and it's like, oh shit! So there's a small child being threatened by a load of people. So Flint just steps out in between them and says, "Stay back, leave the child alone," kind of thing. And they immediately shoot what turns out to be a gun and kill the woman instantly. So it's like, oh shit.
And then
and
then it was perpetuated by Elsie turning into a werewolf and everyone getting terrified.
And then she ripped somebody's head off.
And then, but if you also remember, that's where Flint got particularly upset with the fact that they'd killed this woman, and we killed them all, and there was one left who was a female thief or something.
I can tell you exactly all of them and give you their names and what they look like if you want, because I wrote them.
But I do remember that. All I remember is that Flint was so enraged because has the fiery hands thing, and we were trying to get some information out of her. And
I don't know if we even were.
I think we were. We were trying to work out where they came from or something. So basically, he sort of clamped his hands to the side of her head and fired them up to sort of burn her head. And then he realised what he was doing and went and stopped and left, and somebody else, I think Unit, cured her while he was.
I think so.
The
Kyoto killed one of the two.
Flint wanders off down the road, feeling very, very upset with himself, and that was an interesting scenario. So that one actually was his fault.
So the thugs that you came up against, I don't know if you ever actually did find out their names and stuff, but it's
I don't
always
think
fun
we
to-
had a chance because
the
they
four
they
ruffian
specified
bandits.
them.
Yeah, well, so the one at the front was Nathan Grawn, a human with a giant greatsword holding it over his neck loosely with a cocky smile on his face. He's wearing tight leather, showing his muscles with rolled up sleeves and his scars over any visible skin. His hair is messy and long, hanging down the sides of his face and framing his very prominent jaw. That's Nathan Grawn. Pith Redfall, a drow with a cowboy hat on, a long flowing brown coat and a red neckerchief over his skirt. He's holding some strange weapon in his hand. It's bent 90 degrees, and he's holding one side, pointing the other at them, and they can
He
see.
had a skirt.
And they can see a hole in the end of the metal. A skirt?
Did he have a skirt or a shirt?
You said
shirt. A neckerchief over his
bandana.
shirt.
You said skirt.
I said shirt.
You said skirt.
I knew it was shirt.
Then there was Cell, a humanoid of some sort with grey skin and ritualistic tattoos on his face, wearing a long flowing gown with a huge collar. He's bold and has a manic stare. And then Darn Thronwell, an elf lady holding a bow, wearing leathers green in colour. She's short, evidently has a nimble athletic frame, and has long ginger hair and a plait behind her head, which is the one that you...
Darn Thronwell.
That's right. She was the one who it turned out that I think she'd been sort of...
Well, the story there was like she didn't really have anywhere to go and had no money and all that, and sort of got in with the wrong crowd and wasn't a massive fan of what was going on, but it's one of those, I can't really get out because then what do I do and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's it.
And then we killed all her friends. And
Yes.
Scorched her face.
And then she got arrested, I believe. So she'll
Yeah,
still be in...
How was that? That was in...
God, I just had it open. Yeah, it was in Comanthia. I just had it open.
It was either before or after Hull, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was on those walks. It was...
Yeah, it was on the way from...
It was in
on the way-
Sharuk. In Sharuk.
Sharuk. Oh, yes, I see. That was when we were going northeast, where we were heading up towards the...
I feel like this is one massive tangent. What was the original question?
I don't know. Oh, I said, is there any thing that
Things.
wanted to happen that disappointed
The one.
you?
I thought that there was going to be some sort of nefarious outcome to the having given the crystal to the wizards in Cortia.
Oh, I know you. You were like pushing and pushing against the king.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
specifically pushing against the wizardy guy, and then I pushed against the king because he was defending his wizardy guy.
Yes.
Yes, I've forgotten that.
I remember that conversation because it was like, you know, your distrust, and then you being like, "Yeah, we're friendly,
Mostly because
but
he
I'm
was like-
still the king."
Because he was like the wizard guy was like, let me have a look at this crystal, and I handed it over to him, and then he was like, oh yeah, I think we'd want to get rid of this or whatever he said, and I was like, I actually think I probably want to look at it a bit more first, give it back, and he was like, nah, it's mine now.
Well, no, what he said was
Right.
like, this needs to be like immediately dealt with, and this can't be out in the world. Like from his side, it's some dudes come up with like an insanely powerful and dangerous and all that kind of stuff, like crystal with trapped souls in it. I ain't giving that back to go out into the world. What if you lose it, it gets stolen, you use it, all that kind of
What
stuff.
if you lose it? You know, it isn't me. I would be the sort of person that would just.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where did you put the
super
super
powerful ancient dark crystal? Oh, lose me own head next, didn't I?
Yeah,
Bloody
it's
hell,
like,
left it in-
where did I
left
put
it in,
it?
Greg. Sorry.
Where did I put it?
Slipped down the back of the sofa. Don't know.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's
I feel like I've not been playing long enough to have things that I feel like haven't panned out. But I can say something that I hope pans
Panned
out
out?
more.
Hand out.
Hey,
that's a joke because he has a pan.
It
he
is.
does. The thing that I hope pans out is I would love for there to be more with that Adventurers Guild. I thought that was so funny, and
That was
especially
good,
when again like using commune or divination or something, being like, you know, where do we rank compared to them, and the answer being like, yeah, you could just destroy them easily if you wanted to. I really want them to be like this group of really like inept adventurers who think that they're great.
You want us to have a Team Rocket?
So the idea that
No, not even that. So I don't know if you guys have seen Supernatural, but there is so it's about, you know, the two brothers who go around and actually
I've
fight
seen most
ghosts
of
and werewolves
Supernatural.
and stuff. So what I picture this adventurers group to be like is the ghost faces, the guys who are like trying to make a web series around fighting ghosts, and they didn't really believe in them at first, and they were kind of a bit shit, and they keep getting bailed out. That kind of thing. I think would
I
be
haven't
really
seen
funny.
Supernatural. I've seen a lot of YouTube video essays about it.
So the idea, it's a little meta, but the idea of the Adventurers Guild in, because the only place you've seen one is in Kugurom, is the dwarves in Kugurom are ridiculously proud to be dwarven, and everything's dwarven, and they're the best, and they're the most amazing, and they're all powerful, got the biggest army, all that kind of stuff. And this idea of this Adventurers Guild that everybody, like, not just the Adventurers, like, worships is, look at us, we've got this big Adventurers Guild that, you know, saves us from everything. They can do anything, they're big and powerful. And I'm not, obviously you don't know how powerful they actually are, but I just love this idea of, like, of course in the middle of Kugurom, where they're all proud to be themselves, there's this, you know, these elites at the top kind of, which is basically just a museum with some officers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I did imagine it as literally the British Museum.
Yeah,
like,
there's
that
just
was
a museum in it.
My image of it was the British Museum,
exactly,
like, including the gift shop and everything.
Exactly, and it's like really big and expensive, and there's a museum. You're like, why? What are you doing?
Campaign 3, we are
Look at these
new
models that we
adventurers.
stole.
We are new adventurers in the new Adventurers Guild.
Oh no!
Or wherever.
Okay, that's okay.
And we do like it's like a kind of My Hero Academia style thing of we're all kind of a bit crap at what we do, but there's like inter guild events, and we have to like do competitions and fight them off and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to say,
written it for you, Alex. You're welcome.
The
rival school is the Kugurom one.
Yes. I was going to say the topper I liked on the cake of the Adventurers Guild in Kugurom was, to be a part of the Adventurers Guild, you have to pay. You don't get paid to be a part of it.
Obviously, that makes perfect sense to me that there's like a membership fee. I would have thought you get a cut of like the loot as well as the guild, but like the membership fees thing absolutely made sense to me. I thought that was great.
Exactly. So I sort of picture it as being a sort of adventurous pyramid scheme.
Well, no, because I reckon like there's like lots of like old like councilmen and stuff in the city, and like bankers who are all part of the Adventurers Guild, and they never go on adventures or anything, but they just want the prestige, so they've got like the the social membership.
But I was going to say also, you get these sort of inept people, as you say, Joe, so turning up, and they pay their money, and they do, you know, when you're a kid and you learn judo and you get lots of grades,
badges,
and at that point you're actually no good at it, but it makes you feel like you're getting somewhere. So you have this idea of sort of that you pay your money and you keep paying your monthly fee.
Me feels very attacked.
And you have these failed adventurers, guys who have been out and just can't do it. And they're just rubbish. But they now teach you. Oh yes, you hold your sword like this. No, put your left foot forward a bit more. That's it now. And then they end up getting you're now an adventure grade 7. That increases your how much you pay by 10% a month, but you get to wear a gold badge or something.
Yeah.
So they all think they are, qualified adventurers, and at some point we come up against a whole bunch of the sort of senior ones who discover that they actually don't know how to do it at all. That would be very amusing. I think.
They're all there with like kind of old rusty swords that have been stuck in like a drawer for ages, and like
they'd be perfect. They'd be absolutely pristine. You know the classic
beautiful
gun on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. They'd be perfect, but made of really poor grade steel, so they'd be shine like the sun, and as soon as you hit it, it breaks it.
Classic moment, and I know I'm kind of ruining it, but because it may happen. This could actually happen in the thing, and honestly, even me saying it now, I think you'd enjoy it when it happens. You come up against one of these adventurers who puts a sword to you. You know, they swing and you defend, and the sword just goes thunk, and just cuts in two around your blade, or like you just punch their blade and it just shatters. I love that as a. I don't know. I will be honest with you. The amount that the Adventure Guild is fleshed out is mostly just boneworks and stuff for fun. Yeah. But like this brings on to a point which I was going to say earlier of the amount that I focus on things depends on how much you guys talk about it and focus on it yourselves, especially when we do like the pre-show talks and like anything where we're talking about it between sessions. The things that you bring up more are the things that I focus on more, because of course if you're enjoying it, why wouldn't I focus on it more? Whereas you know things that you barely mention, I'm like, okay, well, you know, whatever. I'll just ignore that and move on, and we'll focus on the more important things.
Let's look at Rosie's comments.
Rosie in chat, yes, saying if only the sword was titty metal. That's a reference to our individual streams, because I know Joe and Simon won't get it. There's no point in going into it, but just know that titty metal is a metal now. Just it's not in gel. It's just.
I see.
Yeah, just
Is it the
Yes.
the metal that all those weird like bikini armors are made from in RPGs?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I've made sure to never do, and I'm sure none of you ever expect it to be. There's never the all the female adventurers are scantily clad. Nothing.
Unless they want to be.
Well, if they want to be, sure, but it's all the practical clothing. They wear what's appropriate.
Yeah.
And why would you not?
Do you reckon
Well,
there's
exactly.
do you reckon the Cougarum Adventurers Guild have like the kind of equivalent of like when the ladies circle go to pole dancing sessions or whatever? They're just like girls,
I haven't
just girls
thought about it.
just like having a great time, just like it's just supportive girls who are just having a good
Yeah,
time.
I haven't thought about it too much, but I imagine the Adventurers Guild is extremely sexist.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, the pole dancing club thing isn't like that's like a wholesome girls
I would have
activity
thought-
more than like a specifically misogynistic thing.
I would have thought they'd be like, "Do you have money? That's fine. You can be an adventurer."
Yes, but they wouldn't be obvious about it. But it'd be like, they wouldn't send the girls on the actual big adventurer sort of thing. They'd train them all and be fine. But then there'd be that like underlying. It's always a disadvantage
actually,
for
I
the
can
girls.
imagine.
Which makes me even more keen to have more interactions with them, so that
Slap them around
we
the
can have
face.
party happen to them.
Yes.
Well, yes. I mean, you can imagine that the kind of people who would go along to Adventurers Guild, the women would probably be far better than the blokes who are there. So they'd actually be potentially quite good adventurers, whereas the blokes who get sent out are just completely rubbish, and they manage to sort of vanquish the odd badger. So, whereas meanwhile back at base, they're like, yeah, you can make the tea. So that would be, I could, imagine Elsie rather turning up.
Rosie?
It's just
Rosie's
Rosie's in chat.
Imagine Elsie turning up and just like leading the ladies to sort of, right, let's get out of here and form a proper guild where we do it right.
That would actually be incredible. So you've got the kind of the hapless adventurers guild with like a few women who haven't cottoned on yet, and all of these like ridiculously ineffectual men. And then you've got like called something else, like the Sisterhood of whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a women-only adventurers guild where they just go out and
Vipers.
get shit done.
I think that is in Elsie's future, like the kind of
Well,
end of Harry Potter epilogue 30 years later. Elsie has become a competent leader and is leading her
That would
women-only
be
guild.
incredible.
Yeah. Oh, that would be
That would be
brilliant.
so
well,
good.
I was going to say, like,
Mage Guild.
on a similar vein, like, if you were saying, well, let's make our own Adventurers Guild. If you did make your own Adventurers Guild, I haven't thought about it much, but, like, there'd be a moment, if those in Cougaron found out there's another Adventurers Guild, because you don't know how many there are, or whatever, they'd probably be like, we, the best Adventurers Guild in the world, need to go over, or invite them around and show them the ropes. We'll go on an adventure together and show them, or, like, you'll go on the same adventure, and they'll just be going,
What do you
what are
think?
you doing?
I would love
Would
that.
they?
Do you know
would they
what
do
that
a-
puts- Sorry, you go.
I guess would they do like a Munich Olympics kind of thing? Where we'll hold a huge competition to show everybody how great we are and how crap you are, and then you just walk and do a Jesse Owens and just.
Or it just be like very clearly rigged in their favor, so that like there's like a weightlifting competition, and then like your weight to like the actual like 60-kilogram weights for the
Yeah.
barbarian, and then like their barbarian has like a foam ball that's like coated in like tinfoil or something.
Yeah. It puts me in mind of have any of you seen Overlord, the anime?
No.
I've
So
heard of it,
it's-
but not seen it.
So it's this guy who it's the kind of very classic, he he spent his whole life playing this MMORPG, and he's this leader of the guild, and he's this massive powerful lich, and his guild reached like the highest level in the game, whatever. And the game is shutting down because it's not got enough players or whatever. And so he stays in the game during the shutdown as kind of like a last watch or vigil or whatever. And then the timer ticks over, and it's become real, and he is this massive lich guy.
And he can't log out.
Yeah, and he can't log out, and it's just that is his life now, and he is this crazy powerful dude. But the world outside of his like guild keep is different. And so he kind of goes out in disguise, and there are like adventurers guild, and he takes on a job as a beginner just to kind of like see how good the warriors and stuff of this place are, and it is very much based on things like D&D. There are roles and clerics.
It's what if Sword Art Online but funny, and you are like an
Yeah.
all-powerful Lich King.
Yeah, and it's literally like they go on this quest and they go and they try. People are talking about this creature that lives in the forest called like the Wise King of the Woods or something, and they're terrified. And it turns out it's this like massive hamster with a scorpion tail, and he like smacks it with his hands and tames it. And everyone's like, "Oh my god, you must be this incredible triple S class adventurer." And he's like, "No, like level 10 players could do that in like when this was a game. Like I'm level 600."
So all I'm hearing right now is one punch.
that kind of thing where he's like, "Why is this so difficult for you?"
I love One Punch so much. Now that we've taken another half an hour on a question, it's a good segment.
This was the one you wanted to be the short question, right?
That's right.
Well, to be fair, you answered the short question part very quickly. It just got onto a tangent. The question I was going to ask, and this will get tangented again, I'm sure. But
no, not at all.
Is actually flipping it around. And don't feel any pressure. I was just going to say, are there any like questions you want to ask me? Obviously, I'm not going to be too like meta. I'm more generous in these talking sessions with my meta stuff, because it's really hard being a DM when the only people who would be interested in what you have to say are the people you can't tell because they're the ones in the bloody adventure.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, absolutely.
But do you have any questions?
Well, let's see. The first question would be, when do we get our next XP?
When do you get your next XP? Every time you ask, it gets later.
It can't get much later, really. We're running out of time.
Look, I have a question.
Unit has almost left the campaign.
I think we touched on this a little bit as I said earlier, with the spell and thing I was looking at doing. But I don't know if you've talked about it with the other guys or kind of on stream. The thing with the planar wyverns and their kind of limits on teleportation, is that a staple that will not really be able to do much about, or could that be its own quest and we can air quote fix that?
So like, as I said before, anything that happens you can take your own route on. In my mind, obviously again try not to be too like obvious about these things. If you started, and this is more just my DM style, if you started an adventure focused on trying to fix that, it's unlikely I would hit you with like 3 months of adventure where at the end it's like, well, we just can't do it.
No, you can't.
Because like I said before, if it's important to you and seems to be like something that you guys are really interested in, yeah, I'll work on that. I'll make it more of a thing. I will, probably have to, push that as a quest and flesh it out and think about it and go that sort of route. But if you're really going on it, there's kind of a solution to anything. I've said a load of times before, whenever you do an adventure, I have what I expect to happen, but I also don't necessarily expect that to happen. Like, that's the most logical route and tends to be the most sort of like, easiest for me kind of bit. But if you go in a completely different direction, I'm like, let's go. Let's start working this one out. Let's work it out together. And so if you started on a quest to do that, there are vague things that I leave that are kind of open-ended and you could interpret or possibly are set out to be like, oh yeah, that's a hint that we could fix this kind of thing. And then if you started pushing into it, I give you more information, blah, 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 blah. So it with anything, and this in particular, there's never like a restriction that would ruin your fun. I'd rather fix that and then that just no longer be like a problem for you guys anymore and you've had fun doing it, then remove it. Plus, as much as I've been kind of rude, like, haha, you can't teleport anywhere anymore, I try to make it a story point, make sense, and be kind of fun to exist, but also, you got an airship. I pushed it a little bit, so you're like, this is a struggle, this is a struggle, this is a struggle, and then you're like, now we have an airship, we can still travel around, because if I was to give you a huge world, tell you there's something, the other side of the world, and then go, what a shame, every time you teleport, you have to fight a big dragon. It would just get so exhausting after a while,
Yes, well, yes, in a sense, but of course we can just say, when we go to walk there, and then you would say, okay, are you going to do anything? No.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Exactly. But
it would get quite tedious. I mean, in our terms, we could be there in 5 minutes, but in game terms, it'd be 3 months.
Well, I mean, in our terms, we could just be there immediately because, it's all imaginary anyway. We could just.
Well, exactly. Yes, we have to invent some kind of teleportation that doesn't go to the plane.
Concorde turns into an actual Concorde.
Yes.
I mean, you're kind of on the Concorde, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
Any other
Yeah, I was very
questions?
disappointed. I was very disappointed when I couldn't use my immovable rod flute on the ship. Because
Yeah, there's moments like that where I'm like, I have to think about, like, that thing sits in space and time, and technically, you know, the world is rotating, so it could. I'm like, yeah, I have to like set a line as to where that would. What is it in reference to? And if it's in reference to the Earth,
This is the nexus point.
your ship, it moves away from it, and it's difficult.
See, I'm glad that came up, because I put an immovable rod in the game that I DM my home game, and I specifically said, right, so that this doesn't come up in the future, it is relative to the world. If you are on a wagon and you click it, it will stay behind and you will keep going.
Yeah.
And it felt like it was a handy thing to set out at the beginning, because it doesn't say anything in like the description of the item about it. It's totally up to kind of interpretation.
Yeah. Well, one of the first things in the DM's guide is like, these are all suggestions, not rules. Use what you want, don't use what you don't want. This, you know, you can do whatever you like, and this is where like rules lawyers come into it, and like, yeah, fine, technically the book says that, but fuck you. And I'm really glad that Joe and Greg know so much about the technical rules, because honestly, one of the things, you know, you say like, I build this gigantic world and all that. One of the things that allows me to be more free with that is I don't have to know all the rules. I know all of my rules, and they know all of the technical rules, and that's why I ask them questions all the time. I'm like, what's this? What does it say? What does the brain say? And then I work with it. You know, it works really well for me. But then obviously there's certain points where it's like, that's boring. Let's just do it our way. Let's do what we want to do. Like, for example, the critical rules, which I didn't come up with myself. That came from, I think it's from a different podcast, which is fairly popular, called DBDnD, where it came about because it's like, a critical attack technically can still just be a really shit attack. And this idea of getting a natural 20 is really hype, it's really big, it's like, let's go. And then you roll, you know, you normally roll 1d8, you roll 2 d8s, and you get 2 1s. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
Whereas if you automatically inherently get max damage and then more, it feels like a special hit. Even if you're only rolling 2d4s, it is inherently a special hit. It does more damage no matter what, because you're doing more than you ever would.
And it ramps up the pressure on the party as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly.
Because a fight that's going your way can super easily swing. You know what the thing with the Warforged and that one Witch Bolt, where Purdy got a nat 20 on like something that they were already going to be rolling like 8d8 on. Yeah. You know, that was crazy. If that had happened to us, that might have been insta-death.
Exactly, it annihilates back, and just wait. You got to wait for like a critical on like Dragon's Breath of some sort. You know, like an ancient dragon comes down and criticals one of those. Ooh.
Speaking of incident, by the way, and this is not part of this question, just remind me. I loved the bit in the recent one where Flint got caught by the 3 hand grenades.
Oh god, yeah, the explosions were fun.
He was standing in exactly the right place to get hit by 3 hand grenades.
That was nearly me. That was nearly Unit.
Unit got blasted back, but he didn't get anywhere near the.
I lost 3/4 of my health in that hit.
I don't think
I was on 25 HP, which is the lowest I've been in the entire campaign.
You were on 25 HP, but that's because you had already been hit.
Yes.
Oh, had I maybe?
Yeah, you'd already been attacked, whereas Flint hadn't been hit, and he lost all his health.
I had been hit, but I mean, I had 102 points or something, and I had lost about 17, which is like, oh dear, a small scratch on my arm. And then that one was 105 on its own. That one 3 explosion thing would have knocked him down anyway.
Yeah.
But he'd already lost 17, so it's like it's just again.
Exactly.
Like when I went up against that Warforged, speaking of Warforged, I was like, haha! You went.
Alex, Rosie has a question.
I was going to come to this. Yes.
Yeah. Did Concord come about because Purdy was sad we didn't have pets?
So this is going to be far more in depth than you were expecting. But C1, there were pets, and it got really annoying.
Boy, were there pets.
It got really annoying, and we love pets, but it got kind of annoying, kind of constantly tracking them. And there was no like intentional we won't have pets, but I think everyone was just kind of like, I just can't be bothered. Concord came about from a random roll, like a random thing to happen, and it was like I think it was an animal hits the deck, but I expanded on it more to make it like an animal fight that just like you suddenly are in between, and then Concord's like, oh, this is nice, and just sticks around, you know.
Yeah.
So it wasn't because of Purdy being sad she didn't have pets. Purdy was sad she didn't have a pet in the first campaign, and then she had a pet that she. If I had been brutal,
forgetting about it, yeah.
If I had been brutal and stuff that again going back to DBDnD, a different podcast, there was at one point one of them had a little pet mouse where a few months into the campaign she reaches into her pocket to get the mouse and it's just dead because he was brutal. I was like, you haven't been paying attention to this mouse at all, it's dead. And I was like, I could have done the same thing for,
you really
for them because they just weren't paying attention to them at all.
I had what was in campaign 1 what was supposed to be a pet and then turned into
oh my god, an additional party member near enough.
Well, I loved Crisco. That was so much fun playing
his name wasn't Crisco.
This you've been given to help you out this little imp who just doesn't want to be there but has to do what you says, but still sarcastic as anything.
It was brilliant, absolutely was. It was oh god, I forgot his damn name.
You call him Therabim.
Therabim the Mighty, son of Tharagog the Mighty.
Tharagog, yeah.
And he ended up as Therabim the, what was it? I'll have to look up.
It was
Seventh or eighth,
seventh or eighth or something, yeah.
No, more like.
And every time he was like, "You can name me."
He would resummon it and then call it
let me just.
Treat it as if it was a separate pet, even though it was the same one.
Oh yeah, it was the same one every time.
It was the same. It was the same imp being resummoned every time. Where are we?
No, but I mean, Whitebane treated it as if they were separate imps.
Yes, because Whitebane's an idiot. I loved Whitebane's story of
There you go. His name eventually, but by the time he finished, his name was Crisco Therabim the 16th, son of Tharagog the Mighty.
Yeah. No, I very much enjoyed.
Tharagog the Mighty was actually a lizard.
He was really
he was a lizard, yes. I very much enjoyed Whitebane being this high noble who was not set up to be an adventurer, becoming an adventurer because he has powers given to him by accident because his mum sold his soul. It's just this complete mess of his dad sold his soul. It's absolutely for a amulet to make him look normal. This absolute mess of a childhood.
Which he then destroyed.
I did.
I had this.
His own mum destroyed it.
Because again, Joe doesn't know any of this, I'm sure, but the character was a tiefling.
Yes, no, because I had a similar character concept for a future campaign that I can't do because otherwise I'll be doing.
Yes.
I'll maybe do the same thing that he did.
But the thing about that one was he had this mega powerful amulet which made him look human all the time. So, but I had to engineer a situation where eventually the party realised he wasn't actually human. He was a tiefling wearing this amulet, and then eventually he gets to meet his mum, who then destroyed the amulet. And he ended up I can't look like a human anymore. Do you remember that he met her in some subterranean the drains or something. There's some.
And then
you were in the sewers, and she sacrificed a man, broke your thing, being like, "Oh, you can be powerful like me. I'm a big bad demon. You should be the same." And Whitebane being like, "I don't really want to." And then the funniest part of all of it is she broke the amulet.
Oh, yeah.
You had to stay as a you couldn't turn back into a human. You had to work your way through the sewers as a tiefling, and then after the session,
I cast darkness. No, I cast darkness.
Oh yeah,
because somebody came near the path, and I was trying to creep past them so they wouldn't see me.
Yeah,
because I was now looking like. And I crept down to the end, and I managed to break through some. I know I tell you.
You slid through a pipe that was effectively just like a shit pipe that you could just fit through, and then the next session he goes, "Oh, I have a disguised self scroll."
Yeah, I couldn't just disguise myself. I couldn't just disguise myself as a human and walked out. I would have been fine.
It was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's parallels to Elsie having a curse of a werewolf for several episodes before we realised that we could have just removed that
just
curse.
dispel the curse. Yes, exactly.
Bartlett comes up like, "Yo, I fixed your problems." I love Bartlett's competence with spells compared to the group because.
Hey.
Well, no, but here's the thing. I mean, in roleplay, Unit has these spells but doesn't think about doing remove curse on someone because it's not his problem. Elsie is just chaos magic, and the rest of you didn't really have the magic to do it. And Bartlett comes up like, "Why aren't you just doing the correct? Why? What?" I love it so much.
Oh dear, yes, that was good fun.
I have to say, I really like Bartlett as an addition to the party.
Oh yeah, it works really well.
I think you've really added a really nice dimension
Yeah,
I would
definitely.
agree as a whole.
Definitely, yeah.
Bartlett
I mean, I
definitely
think
has
that- I think
dimension.
the way the
Especially
party...
because it means that I can not be present for longer.
I was going to say the way the party works now is different because without Etch, it became more chaotic anyway. Bartlett is chaotic in a nice way. And
Bartlett isn't chaotic. He's just he's a little dim, isn't he?
He's,
well, no, I'd
he's
say
easily led.
Yeah.
Timid. He's a little bit timid, but he's very good at what he does. And the fact that he can do the healing has given those who are chaotic more confidence to be chaotic, and it's just changed the feel of the sort of, I don't know how to describe it really. Just the whole sort of feel of the party is slightly different, and in a good way. I mean, it was fun before. It's fun.
He's
now,
a big
just slightly
fluffy
different.
safety net, that's why.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's worked really, really well. It's been really good. I mean, I like the way. This is going back to our.
I also love the chef motif.
Yes, exactly.
It's
and the way
really
you stick
good.
to it with the smells and the tastes and the
Exactly.
frying pan and the great
I
beef.
love skinning spells. Like I've said this to you guys every single time. Put a skin on your spell, make it your own. It's not going to change the mechanics, but it'll be so much better if it's personalized. You know.
Yeah, that's tricky for me because I don't really have much of those spells. I do have a few spells now, but I've never used them really.
Well, fire blasts are less personalized, but you know.
Speaking of which, I have some ideas,
Fire
Alex,
Blast,
we
but
might
really
want
good.
to talk about later.
I have burning hands and a couple of other bits and pieces. Nothing. I've got to identify and things like that, which you can't really.
What was that, Sam?
I was just saying we need to have a chat later because I have.
Oh yeah,
a few
I was
ideas.
planning on asking you to stick around after we end the stream.
Cute.
I need to talk
Right,
to you
just
a
on
little
that note, are we going to when we normally go to?
No,
or
so
are
we're going to do a half an episode. There will not be a break; it will be end of sesh. Because as much as we could probably ramble on for another couple hours, we will run out of things. And I think it's a good place to be. In about 10 minutes or so, we'll come. So, are there any finalized
We'll start
questions?
talking about Solihull, and that's when we know that we need to leave.
Are there any finalized questions, things you want to ask, things you want to point out, favorite moments, things that you absolutely detest? You know, confessions.
No, I think we've covered most of my favourite bits. Getting killed several times, getting better. Yeah, that moment when Flint was actually dead, and there was that moment where you sort of said, because I'd sort of like, okay, he's gonna die. I had actually got a sort of semi-built character just in case he died for real. And then you had that moment of, oh, here's your parent. The parent's going to die fairly soon. You can go back, or you can stay dead. What do you want to do? And just like on the spot, like
That's one of my favorite things to do. It's one of my favorite things to do, to find
that was
genuine like feelings in this sort of thing, like whether it be like strife or happiness or something, when that sort of thing where you just are completely not expecting to have to make a decision like that. Because if you thought about that decision in the future, you could play it, but it'd be like, yeah, okay, ooh, which one am I gonna pick? But when I just throw it at you and you go, what? what do you mean? It's like genuine, like this one.
I was on a knife edge. I really was whether to say no, he's going to stay where he is. And eventually it was like, well, what would I had to do? What would Flint actually do in that situation? And that was really difficult. And but that was really that moment sticks out as one that was like a really interesting moment for me in character terms to what to do. So
still the most powerful moment like that, completely off stream, that I'm really sad that I didn't use this concept for like a one shot or something, because now that it's been done, it just won't work. I just did a little thing when we were like learning D&D. I was getting better at DMing, and this must have been like 2 years ago now. It was me DMing for just Purdy and Greg, and I did a story that I called Who Am I? And effectively, their two characters I had pre-created, and they woke up with no idea who they were as a character. They woke up and were finding things out as they went. Like they didn't know what race or character or anything, blah 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 they were. They went through this story for a while, and there is a moment. Actually, I think I do have it recorded, but I'm never going to post it because the quality and all those things. Technically I could, I guess, but maybe at some point I'll show the footage. But there's a moment where they both discover that them as the two characters are the bad guys. What they've done and the horrible things that they are the bad guys. They were part of this like massively horrible bandit group, and you can hear it in both of their voices when they're just like, oh. Like this realization, like the moment they realize, they're just like, oh fuck. And it's a real like that like leading up for like an hour or also an hour or two of them just like, oh yeah, what's going on? Oh, it's fine, we're big adventures, and then just like, oh shit, and then trying to work from there, like, oh, what how it's a beautiful moment that I can't really recreate for them because I've already done that idea of you don't know who you are. I really should have saved that for something else, but it was the moment is beautiful. Maybe I'll find it at some point and just sort of like post it as a little clip or something. I don't know.
I have a final question, and it might be one that you can't really answer very much at the moment. So obviously we're kind of doing this kind of like end of season series, and then we're coming back after a few weeks, kind of continuing on. What does end of campaign look like for you?
You know, I don't know the answer to that question because when I started it, I was like, this is open ended. And I didn't.
Get crushed by boulders.
I wasn't. I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting like to think of an end of season, but like, and I didn't really call it the end of season until like a week or two ago. I was like, we'll just have a mid-season break, like a break. And I thought, you know what, this is actually kind of the end of a season because it's a lot of like things resolving, and then we move on. So it's a really nice place to start a new series. After a year and 50 episodes. Technically 49 episodes, which is just one-off. It's just one-off! But I think if I had to answer the question right now, and this doesn't mean this is definite, it's just like what I'm off the top of my head, something where we want to do like a big time skip, have a completely new party, and everything is slightly different. You know, we start in a new place. You want to completely develop from zero. I think the biggest factor of it all is resetting all of the character levels to 3. Because if any of you change your characters, which, you know, I'm not going to say whether you do or don't, but it has already happened, I say just match the level of the party currently. It makes it so much easier. Maybe it's a little off, but it makes it so much easier to keep up. Yeah, there is some fun idea of like having a level 3 character and a load of level 15s, but that amusement goes away after about 4 sessions, and then you're just frustrated that you can't do anything.
Yeah, this is the thing I was thinking.
But if we wanted to, a new campaign would be all new characters back to level 3 or level 1 even, and then start again in the new world with a complete, like maybe time skip up, you know, 1,000 years or something, set it up and just go from kind of from scratch again.
All you do is you have an NPC Elsie in charge of an adventurers guild, and we just be a bunch of adventurers who turn up and start training.
Yeah,
I was just going to say one of the things that's kind of weird about D&D, which it has its good points and bad points, but I find kind of sometimes a bit frustrating, is that the lower levels of characters are very limited in what they can do, but at the high levels you can do more stuff, but it means that you have to really kind of power creep the enemies and NPCs to match in a way that almost doesn't make sense.
The hardest part of DMing is encounter balancing.
Yeah,
especially because you're kind of taking it like a kind of... There was a Fallout 3 you could do where you could essentially go anywhere in the map and then the enemies just scaled according to your level, which it kind of doesn't make sense in like a narrative way.
It's one of those suspension.
It would make sense there would be areas that were harder that you couldn't go to or that you would be punished if you went to.
It's one of those things where, like, yes, you know, you technically don't get the quests that have the harder stuff until you get there, but at the same time, you kind of just have to suspend that, like, idea that it's so convenient that you're always just about matching the level of who you're up against. But can you imagine if I just threw you into a situation with a load of, you know, now you've got 2 ancient dragons to fight? Like, yes, I could do that, and if I would do that, there is always like a fairly obvious and very easy way for you to just go the other direction. Because like if you did come up against that, it would be like, yeah, we ain't dealing with this right now. I'm gonna make it fairly obvious. Like, for example, if coming up, I know you haven't really had like a bee-bag yet, but like if coming up there was a gigantic bee-bag and somehow you managed to meet them, bee-bag, big bad evil guy, BBEG. If you had one of those and like you managed to somehow, and I probably would let you get to them and then be face to face with them, yeah, I'm not going to make them scaled level. Like, you'd freaking struggle because that makes sense. But most of the time it's like, you know, I'll make it hard, but I'm not going to, you know, I just can't be bothered with that kind of thing.
When I'm DMing, which I haven't done for ages, and that's good because it's hard work. I always reckon that if you had a fight where one character died, as in not perma died, just went down. If one character goes down, that means it was a hard fight and probably just about right. You need people to be, worrying that it might go down and maybe even have one go down.
Yep.
But if I have had, I'm sure you've had the same. I've had fights in the past where I put a set of of baddies against a set of characters, and after a couple of 3 rounds, I'm like, the trouble is here, they're not reacting as I expected, and they're all going to die. So you have to start not using some of the things that your guys could do.
Yeah,
try and balance the fight.
On the fly balancing, I think is one of the, you cannot pre-balance a fight perfectly, ever. No. I don't think that's possible.
I'm sure some people can if they're really, really good.
I don't believe they can. I think you can set up a pre-balance and it can be pretty good, but the inherent point of playing a game like this is it has to scale. In video games, it's fine. You die, you do it again. You die, you do it again. But in D&D, you don't die and do it again because that just doesn't make sense and it wouldn't be fun. So you have to, sort of gently sort of adjust. I like to put it in a position where everyone has to think about what they're doing. If you're not thinking about what you're doing and just swinging swords and winning, it's wrong. If you are going, I give up because there's no way we can win this, it's badly done. If you're thinking, okay, so if I do this round and that next round and then you do this and this happens and that, and you start coming up with those tactics, I mean, it's in the right place because you have to think about where the fight's going to go, and it might change and you have to readjust. And that's what I think is a good fight. It's something where you interactively have to fight and think about it.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love doing combat in D&D. I love on both sides of it, doing the thing and all the different abilities, and there might be spells you don't normally use. But when you are on the DM side of it, it is so difficult because not only have you got to think about the actual fight itself, you've got to think about everything that they might do, or that you have set up for them to do before you get to the fight. Because one of the reasons why kind of BBEGs are so difficult, or supposed to be so difficult, is because you've had to fight through traps and minions and lieutenants and stuff to get there. If you do, if you're an adventuring party and you take a long rest outside the room that the BBEG's in, and you have your long rest, the fight itself is probably going to be a cinch.
But then that comes down to a DM being like, you're taking a long rest outside of the. Someone's going to walk out and see you, I was going to make another point there. I adjust as well, the what you're fighting a little bit, because I do find a lot of the time the default monsters in the D&D handbooks, how they're like CR, the amount that how difficult they're going to be is based on how much damage they can do. But then sometimes it's like, if they hit you, they'll do twice, you'll be absolutely dead. But the fact is they have about 4 health. And it's really hard for them to hit you. So actually what the fight goes is you hit them twice and then they're dead. And nothing actually happens. And I find that's where the balance becomes really difficult. It's like, well, yes, if they hit you, it would be a really hard fight. But they haven't, because you've got really high ACs. And then it just became a really simple fight. So every now and again, and I won't tell you when I have or will or whatever, I've done well, you've annihilated its health. They've just got a little bit more health to make the fight actually seem a bit more interesting. Well, I'm sure if people really counted how much health, if they looked at the the guides and looked at how much health they have and how much damage you guys did, they'll see that sometimes that does not add up. But then the fight would be boring. So.
My very first homebrew boss, I did that of they just it was a ridiculously small amount of time, and I just put a little 1 in front of his remaining health to give him 100 extra health, and that then turned out to be exactly the right balance there. Yeah, because
the D&D balance, the D&D balancing doesn't take into account the fact that they might miss.
Is that fun for the players if it's too easy? I mean, if you go into a fight, it's like, I hit it, he dies. I hit him, he dies. He shoots me, he misses. I hit him, he dies. It's like, but if I hit him, no, you parried the first one, you did 10 points to the second, and then he hits you back and does 30 points. It's like, ow!
Exactly. Yeah.
Then you're in a proper, and it's more fun that way. So it's definitely more fun. It's got to be a challenge. Otherwise, what's the point?
Right. We'd love to talk about this a bunch more, I'm sure, but we do have to end up. I'm going to remind everyone
you die and get better.
The schedule that is coming up. So, obviously this week we've had the talks. Next week will be an actual D&D session. It will be the last of the season. It'll be episode 49 of C2 Season 1. I'm not going to change any of the episode title namings. After that, it will not go back to episode 1. It will go to episode 50, but technically it's the end of a season. After that is 3 weeks worth of Joe DMing some like one-shot-esque things that'll all be we'll all be playing the same character throughout them, but it'll be kind of like a time skip between the 3 campaigns. Is the idea.
Unless they die.
Unless they die, yeah, obviously.
I need to talk to Joe at some point about that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you guys some information over the next week.
Yeah. So there'll be 3 of those, 1 per week, which should be a lot of fun, and lets me be a chaotic player character, and everyone can realize why. Actually, to be fair, I play player characters all the time. They're just the NPCs.
Yeah, you do. One way in which you make this even harder for yourself.
So, and then after those 3 weeks, there will be no episode, a pause, a break, because something's going on. Some kind of vaguely important event. That's right.
To London to buy a Heat magazine.
Yes, that's what it is. Or possibly Purdy's getting married. So after that pause, we'll come back to the sessions, season 2 of C2 starting. So that's like a long projection of what's coming up, but that's, reminding everyone of what's up. And I'm excited for all of it. I'm excited to not be DMing for a little bit. It'll be quite fun, and it means I can come up with all sorts of nefarious plans in the meantime.
Not like you ever do that.
3 different TPKs as you fight Tiamat mixed with the Tarrasque. It's gonna be great.
Tiamrask.
Is a vicar/priest a wedding DM?
A what?
Is a vicar a wedding DM?
Yes, that's right, actually. Yes.
Roll for vowels.
Critical one.
Yeah. Can you imagine, like, time for your vowels, and then one of them says their vowels, and then the vicar goes, roll for deception.
I mean, ceremony is a spell that marries people in D&D. You get an AC bonus for it.
I know. I could have done it as minimum.
Yeah.
I could have done it as unit, I think, briefly. Ow. That hurt.
You could do it as unit.
Yes. Well, no, I mean, I don't have the spell anymore.
Oh, he doesn't have the spell anymore.
I was just saying, like, do you take this man to be your lovely wedded husband? Roll a d20. We'll find out.
Wrong station.
Critical one, you start with the mistress's name and not your Ross.
Constitution saving throw.
Anyway, we're going to wave awkwardly at the screen whilst we say goodbye and end up
goodbye, all.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you for next week for some wonderful times. And I'm definitely not going to be evil or anything. Bye. See ya. Goodbye.